Danny Stewart, you're the owner of Turtle Hill Banjo Company, Edgewater, Maryland.
Yep.
You've played with with a lot of well-known bluegrass groups, and you can hit on that later. But first, I want to chat about how we know each other because we go way back. We've played in a band together. I think there's probably a picture somewhere out there of us playing in a country band in Johnson City, Tennessee. But first, I want to dig into your story. Here in this podcast series, I'm going to be digging into bluegrass musicians, how they started playing bluegrass, and sort of where they're at now with it. And so, when did you start your journey into bluegrass music or roots music, whatever you want to call it, where at, and all that?
Yeah, Cody. Thanks so much for having me on here, man. So I was first introduced to playing bluegrass music because my dad plays bluegrass music. He's a traditional bluegrass style mandolin player, plays a lot like Bill Monroe and Jesse McReynolds. His name is also Danny Stewart Sr. He does a lot of things still to this day in the music business world. So I started playing when I was about 8 years old, tried to play a little mandolin and guitar. And then as a teenager, I remember being at a jam session and the bass player in the jam session had to go smoke a cigarette or something. And he's like, play this bass. And I'm like, oh, I have no idea. And I feel like most upright bass players are just kind of thrown into it like that. And it just kind of seemed easy for me. I gravitated towards it
So,
pretty heavily. So yeah.
so bass was the first instrument.
I started playing mandolin, I think, when I was really little, but playing the bass and the guitar, I took really seriously. About 13, 14 years old, that's all I wanted to do. I
Okay.
didn't really play a lot of sports or anything like that. I was really addicted to playing those two instruments, bass and guitar.
So we met eventually circa, I'd say 2006, 2007. I have to like dig deep into memory at this point, which is crazy, as we were talking about before the podcast. But we met in Johnson City, Tennessee at East Tennessee State University's old time bluegrass and country music program. And so
Mhm.
transitioning from there, so you went from, I'm assuming high school, like were you playing much in those early years before you moved down to Johnson City, or how did that come about? How did you learn about the program and end up convincing your parents to let you do that sort of thing?
Yeah, yeah. So like I was saying, I took playing music really seriously in high school, mainly the upright bass. Fell in love with banjo when I was a high school aged kid as well. And I did play a lot with local bands. My dad and myself had a local band in the Pennsylvania region where I grew up. And then I played a lot with the Danny Paisley and the Southern Grass, which is a traditional bluegrass band in the Northeast Mid Atlantic area, based out of Pennsylvania, Delaware.
Yeah, yeah.
But I heard about ETSU from a family friend, Greg Fields,
Yeah.
who I believe is still down there teaching guitar. I haven't talked to Greg in some time, and he was up in the Mid Atlantic or Pennsylvania area doing something, and he introduced himself as being a teacher at a college bluegrass program. I mean, of course, my ears perked up, and I was like, "What? Tell me about that." So, long story short, I went down there, I think, to check out the campus when I was like 16 or 17 years old down in Johnson City. And you and I must have met probably my first year because I started undergrad there in 2007. So, yeah, right after high school, moved on down there. And gosh, what a cool experience that was.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the next question here is like how does that fit? Because that was huge for me. Like that, I didn't really go to ETSU with the intention of joining the program. I went because I'm from Knoxville and it was one of the choices for like a regional school. But
Mhm.
really got into bluegrass while I was up there. And that chapter of my life, like that's why we're talking right now. I still chat with people. I'm still friends with people that I met in the program, play with them to this day. Like last night was with some of the guys from that program. So how does it fit into like your story and how do you like when you, I don't know, reflect on it? Like, what do you think of those days in Johnson City? Because those were fun days, man. We had some good times up there.
What an experience. I always tell people, and I'm halfway joking when I say this. It's like going to ETSU, the bluegrass program, is kind of like going to a bluegrass festival. that never ends.
Hmm.
It's like a 4 year long bluegrass festival because I majored in mass communications. I minored in bluegrass music. When you and I started there, you couldn't major in bluegrass music just yet. Um, but it really, I feel like everybody would agree to this who's ever been through the program. It really just made me understand all of the aspects about the music industry, old time bluegrass and country music, all of the aspects, like, and take it really seriously. Stuff I wouldn't have been able to figure out by myself.
Yep.
Chart writing, harmony singing, just the individual instruction in different ways I wasn't aware of even learning.
Yeah.
Of course, the recording classes that we were exposed to,
Those are
it
fun.
really made we were forced to really just take it super serious. And then, just living in Johnson City in general, like, there was just so much music right there.
Yeah.
Outside of the university, Asheville, North Carolina, super close.
Yeah.
Knoxville, super close. You could take a weekend and go to Nashville. For me, you lived in Tennessee your whole life. For me, just moving to Tennessee just really boosted everything. Just being down there, I'd say.
Yeah. I agree. Like, I think that those jams outside the coffee shop at the laundromat, like I learned more from those jams than anything else. And speaking of country music, because that is where our, I guess, musical connection happened. And I just want to hit on that because that was a big chunk of the ETSU program as well. There was like a country section of that, which I don't know what it's like now, but back in the day, it was like one sort of band. And that's the band that eventually turned into the group that you and I played with, who are still around to this day, which is wild. But that is yeah, I remember specifically. I think there's pictures of us in a bar in downtown Johnson City,
Yeah.
doing our thing, and yeah, those were fun times. Those were really fun times. But I want to get to where you went because this is kind of that's where we left off. Because I can't remember when we've chatted last outside of those shows that we played. But you went on to do some interesting things with bluegrass music. So if you want to hit on that for a second, what happened after ETSU, basically?
Sure, man. Sure. Well, I had, as a teenage kid, my dream job was to be a professional musician, just like probably a lot of us, right? So I had, at an early age, auditioned and won the job with the Larry Stevenson band out of Nashville, which I think you and I were playing with, our Johnson City country band at the same time, and I was playing with both bands at the same time. I feel like. But anyways, I played with them for about 5 years, which was a really cool opportunity for me. We had a tour bus, and we were playing bluegrass festivals all over the country. And then I was still a college student at that time. Played with Larry for a while. Got to play next to the famous Kenny Ingram for many years. Kenny Ingram was the banjo player that literally took Earl Scruggs's place when him and Lester Flatt split.
Sure.
So that was super amazing. I have a love and a passion for the banjo, which we could talk about in a little bit. But at that same time, I graduated from ETSU. Didn't want to leave, right? I was almost sad. I was like, "What's next? I don't want to leave. This is amazing. Should I get my master's degree? What should I do?" So ended up teaching there as adjunct faculty for many years to come. So taught band ensemble classes, individual instruction on guitar, uh, upright and electric bass, and banjo, which was really fun. So that kind of kept me in Johnson City. I knew I wanted to stick somewhere around there, but yeah, I think I was teaching 3 or 4 days a week and playing with the Larry Stevenson band.
Hmm.
And then, that lasted for another 3 or 4 years. And, growing up in Pennsylvania, I'd always heard of the Navy's bluegrass band. Navy's bluegrass and country band were called the U.S. Navy Band Country Current. That band performed a lot where I was growing up and going to festivals as a young kid. And they were looking for a bass player. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting.
Hmm.
Join the military, shave my face and do all that, wear a uniform every day, but get to play bluegrass and country. I got to at least try it. And 10 years later, I've been doing that over 10 years now. It's crazy. Time
Yeah.
flies.
That's
So yeah,
crazy.
that's basically what I've been up to for the past little while.
Yeah, man. Well, congratulations. That I have in my notes here. Do you have with that band, do you have an overall like best experience? Because you must have played literally everywhere. Is there one show or one performance or one setting that kind of sticks out, or is there more than that, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we have such a great job. We have, in my opinion, probably one of the best jobs in the world. We get to wear the cloth of our nation and represent, such a bigger picture, besides ourselves, while playing bluegrass and country music. We're musical ambassadors for not only the Navy but for all of our veterans who've gone before us and took care of the business, to give us the freedoms that we have now. Some really cool things that we do all the time. We get to play downtown DC, White House, Vice President's residence. We
Sweet.
played the Grand Ole Opry last year, which was probably the coolest thing I've ever done for
Yeah,
sure. Hard to
man.
top that. That was amazing. Yeah.
Man, I tell you, as like my young boy visions, like I reckon like congratulations on that, but that's like what you dream of as a musician, as a bluegrass musician, to stand on the Opry stage. That's great, man. That's awesome. I didn't know a lot of this about like I'm genuinely like I didn't even know you taught at ETSU. This is great. But you stand in front of a banjo shop. So why don't you tell us about Turtle Hill Banjo Company? I've heard the guys talk a lot about it. And yeah, tell us what you got going on up there in Maryland.
Cool. Yeah. So the Turtle Hill Banjo Company has kind of been a Maryland staple in the banjo world, or in the whole Mid-Atlantic banjo world for a long time. My good friend Dave Shankman started the Turtle Hill Banjo Company in the early to mid '80s, and dealt with new and used banjos, sales and service, all different kinds of banjos, not just bluegrass banjos, but open back banjos, Irish tenor banjos, banjolailies, mandolin banjos, anything banjo related, he kind of dealt with. He made it public that he was looking to fizzle out his business or maybe potentially sell it to somebody last year. And my eyes just lit up because I thought it was such a cool niche thing that he started.
Mhm.
And I think what's really cool about Turtle Hill is he really kept it just banjos. There's so many cool music stores out there that deal with banjos and also vintage Martin guitars or Gibson mandolins or something. This is just banjos, which I think is super cool. But yeah, I took it over about a year ago. We're in Annapolis, Maryland, and actually a really cool, exciting new thing that's about to be public this week is Turtle Hill is going to be the new location for Neckville banjos, which Neckville banjos are really popular out in the West Coast and in the Midwest. They're a completely different design. There's no hooks and nuts on a neckville banjo. The whole assembly screws on like the lid of a peanut butter jar.
Okay.
And actually, Tom Neckville himself is flying out here tomorrow, and we're getting ready to unveil that too. So that'll be really, really cool.
That's awesome, man. So a lot of like exciting things happening with the business. And you said you're still playing a lot up there, or
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bass player primarily. I have a love and passion for the banjo, but as a bass player, I feel like everybody needs a bass player, right? So I freelance a lot around here in the again, I live in Annapolis, but you know, Philly is super close, Baltimore is super close, DC, even Roanoke and Richmond. This whole area's got a lot of music. So yeah, I play a lot still with the Navy band Country Current, have been for almost 11 years now, and fill in with a lot of bands. I also play regularly with the Tim and Savannah Finch Band. We're the Eastman Strings Band too. I'm sure you've heard of Eastman Guitars. We're kind of
yeah.
like the American ambassadors for how awesome Eastman guitars and mandolins are. So we play Eastman instruments on stage, and we do mainly original music around the Chesapeake Bay area where I live.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I'll put all that information in the description. So a couple things. So in our probably bluegrass world, speaking of like the algorithm, the content that pops up, um, I'm surrounded by it. But it seems overall that this style of music is sort of making a comeback. And I can't help but sort of like peer around all the content and look at like the larger musical picture, aka or i.e. Beyonce, let's just say, for example, it's pop music, but you've got banjos in the mouth. What's your take on that? Are we witnessing sort of like a renaissance, or is it bluegrass having a moment, or what are your take? Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just I'm on the computer too much.
Well, I think with, being on the computer, you just see more things that you wouldn't have if you weren't on, your smartphone or computer. But no, I would say you're right, Cody. I'd say that bluegrass music has exploded the last little while. I remember, when I would talk to a non-bluegrasser about 20 years ago and tell them that I was in love with bluegrass music, they'd be like, "Oh, you mean like that movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, exactly, sure, kind of like that."
Yeah.
And now when I tell a non-bluegrasser that I love bluegrass music or play bluegrass music or whatever, they're usually like, "Oh, you mean like Billy Strings?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, yeah, exactly, like kind of like Billy Strings."
Yeah,
So I
man.
feel like I feel like it's just evolved a lot more. There's people like Billy Strings, Molly Tuttle, who are
Yeah.
literally playing sold out arenas, right?
Yeah.
We weren't playing with bluegrass bands selling out 40,000 seat arenas 20 years ago.
Right.
At least I wasn't privy to it.
No, no, you didn't really see anything like that. I was talking to Aaron Jackson, who also played in the group, and I don't know. It's weird because I mean, the bluegrass festivals have been around for forever, but every like, about the time we met, when I'd go play on weekends or whatever it be, it was generally the same crowd. It was like generally the folks were older in lawn chairs, and you were playing, it's just how it was, It was an older crowd, not so dense of a crowd, but yeah, now that's not really the case. It's making a comeback for sure.
Totally. I've been to IBMA the past several years, which is the International Bluegrass Music Association. It's their annual conference,
Hmm.
World of Bluegrass in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I was just actually looking because I wanted to see if I was right about this, but I was just looking this morning. There's over 100,000 attendees that attend that convention every year from all over the world, right? And
Yeah.
that's super cool to see people from Europe and from Asia that just have the same love for it that we do, and it's great.
Yeah.
We're the future is bright for bluegrass for sure.
Definitely. All right. So to end the conversation, any album of any genre, what would you recommend to people watching out there, and sort of why you recommend it?
Yeah, so I would say there's a few new artists if you're out there watching that maybe you haven't heard of in the same vein. Again, in like the bluegrass, genre. If you haven't heard of East Nash Grass,
Yes.
check them out. They're awesome. If
Yeah.
you haven't heard of the Woodbox Heroes, I was actually just down in Nashville last couple days ago, this past weekend for CMA Fest, and I saw them at the Station Inn. Amazing. The Woodbox Heroes are something to check out for sure. And
Yeah.
then more of a different crossover genre, and she's very popular. So most people out there listening have probably heard of her, Sierra Farrell.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff for sure. But going back a little bit more, some of my favorite albums of all time in this genre would be like Bela Fleck's Drive album.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And then I'm a huge Lonesome River Band fan.
Yeah.
Carrying the Tradition is one of my favorite records they put out in the 90s. And any Del McCoury album.
Yeah.
Any Del McCoury album. Can't go wrong there.
Can't go wrong. I saw him about 2 weeks ago, and he's still playing, man. It's awesome. Well,
So,
Danny, we'll put all the information below. If you're around the Annapolis, Edgewater, is it Edgewater, Maryland? Is that what I read?
yep, I live in Edgewater. It's just the suburb of Annapolis. It's 2 miles away. So
Stop
yeah,
by the banjo shop, say hey to Danny, and appreciate it, Danny. Thanks for doing this, and hope to see you soon in person, perhaps, man.
yeah, that'd be great, Cody. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, we'll see you, man.
See ya.
Bye bye.